When Earth unveiled its first interstellar starship, the universe left. The grand vessel named Celestial Dawn was Earth's crowning achievement, a marvel of engineering, human ingenuity, and sheer ambition. It was meant to break beyond the confines of the solar system, a symbol of humanity's bold entry into the cosmic stage. But to the other civilizations, it was a joke. The sleek, silver craft appeared outdated compared to the mighty cruisers of the Galactic Union. The alien emissaries sneered at its primitive warp drive, its lack of weaponry, its reliance on human pilots instead of artificial intelligence. A child's toy, scoffed the representatives of the Dominion. It will crumble under the pressures of deep space, added the warlords. Even the peacekeeping, who had long observed Earth's progress with cautious optimism, looked upon Celestial Dawn with pity rather than admiration. The launch ceremony was a mix of pride and embarrassment, as the world watched their finest creation become the laughingstock of the galaxy. Despite the derision, the people of Earth stood firm. Scientists, engineers, and pilots alike knew that Celestial Dawn was more than it seemed. What the other civilizations didn't understand was that humanity had learned to survive through struggle and resilience. They had defied odds before, whether in the bitter cold of space or the hostile landscapes of other planets. But this was their first test on a galactic stage, and they refused to back down. Captain Elias Rains, a man who had seen the worst of war and the best of discovery, stood at the forefront, watching as the countdown to launch began. His fingers twitched with anticipation, his gaze steady despite the ridicule thrown at him and his crew. They had trained for this moment, prepared for every possible obstacle, knowing that the fate of Earth's reputation rested on this mission. Aboard the Starship, the atmosphere was a mix of nerves and quiet determination. The crew ran checks, their voices laced with both apprehension and pride. The bridge hummed with energy, consoles lighting up as status reports flooded in. Engine core stable. Navigation online. Quantum drive calibrated, came the steady voices of technicians. Rains listened intently, nodding as his officers confirmed readiness. Outside, the assembled representatives from across the galaxy observed with thinly veiled amusement. Some whispered among themselves, making wagers on how long Celestial Dawn would last before being forced to turn back. The emissary, a towering figure with pristine blue skin, smirked as he leaned toward a general. They have no idea what awaits them beyond their tiny home system. This is nothing more than a feeble attempt at relevance, he mused. The general chuckled, his ridged brow furrowing. Let them try. They will learn soon enough that the stars do not welcome the weak. As the countdown reached its final seconds, the Earth delegation held their breath. This was more than a launch, it was a statement. It was humanity declaring, in no uncertain terms, that they would not be ignored, that they would carve their place among the stars whether the galaxy accepted them or not. With a final roar, the engines ignited, and Celestial Dawn lifted from its launch pad. The observers scoffed and impressed. To them it was another doomed attempt by a species too young to understand the dangers of deep space. They watched through holographic displays, expecting to see failure at any moment. But as the ship ascended, breaking free of Earth's gravity and streaking into the unknown, something changed. The laughter in the control rooms died down. The sneers faded. The emissary narrowed his eyes as readings from Celestial Dawn flickered onto his display. Impossible, he whispered. The ship was accelerating at a rate far beyond what had been projected. The warp field around it shimmered in a way that defied conventional physics. Even the warlord sat forward in his chair, watching with sudden interest. This is not the crude machine they led us to believe it was, he murmured. They hid its true capabilities. On board Celestial Dawn, the crew felt the shift. They were no longer just a subject of ridicule, they were proving something, and they could feel it in the very bones of the ship. Captain Rains exhaled slowly, a small, knowing smile tugging at his lips. Let them laugh, he muttered. We'll see who's laughing when we reach the stars. As the ship continued its ascent into the void, the first leg of humanity's greatest journey had begun. And for the first time, the galaxy was watching with something other than disdain. They were watching with curiosity, and perhaps, just perhaps, the slightest hint of fear. Despite the mockery, Celestial Dawn embarked on its maiden voyage, determined to prove humanity's worth among the stars. Captain Elias Rains, a veteran astronaut with ice in his veins and fire in his heart, commanded the crew of explorers, scientists, and dreamers. Their destination, the uncharted star system of VA-7, a place no known civilization had dared to explore. As the ship pushed through the void, they received transmissions from galactic observers, marking their progress. Still intact? Remarkable, jeered a broadcaster. Give it time. Humans always overestimate themselves. But Celestial Dawn was not merely an experiment, it was a secret Earth had safeguarded with unparalleled caution. The ship glided through the darkness, guided by the steady hands of its crew. Rains sat in his captain's chair, surveying the data flashing across the control panel. The warp engines hummed with an efficiency that defied expectations, but the true test was yet to come. Lieutenant Aryavas, the ship's chief navigator, monitored the course with careful precision. "We are entering the outer perimeters of VA-7, she reported. No known records of gravitational disturbances, but the readings are unusual." Rains frowned. "Unusual how?" She hesitated. "There's something here. A distortion in the energy signatures are fluctuating, almost as if they're alive." The crew exchanged uneasy glances. VA-7 had long been an enigma, a system whispered about in intergalactic lore but left untouched for reasons unknown. The Galactic Union had deemed it too unstable, too unpredictable. Earth, however, saw an opportunity. They had built Celestial Dawn to face the unknown, and here they were, staring into the abyss. As the ship moved deeper into the system, the darkness around them seemed to pulse, shifting unnaturally. "Sir, we are being scanned," Was said. "By what?" Rains asked, his voice edged with caution. "I don't know. There's no ship, no station, just a presence." The main console flickered as an unfamiliar frequency breached their communication lines. A guttural sound echoed through the ship's speakers, more sensation than sound, pressing into their minds. It wasn't a message, it was a warning. Then, the ship shuddered violently. The crew braced as turbulence rippled through the hull. "Captain, we're caught in a gravitational anomaly," Chief Engineer Malik shouted. "Something is pulling us in." The engines roared as the ship struggled against an invisible force. The readings were erratic, beyond anything their instruments had encountered before. "Divert auxiliary power to stabilizers," Rains ordered. "Full reverse thrusters." The ship groaned in protest, but it held. The force that had gripped them began to wane, retreating like a living entity testing its prey. Silence followed. The tension in the air was suffocating. "We need answers," Rains said. "Scan the system for any anomalies." Was hesitated. "Sir, you're going to want to see this." The holographic display above the command deck flickered to life, revealing the heart of VA-7. What they saw defied all logic. A structure impossibly massive loomed in the void. It was not a planet, not an asteroid, something far more complex. A construct, ancient and seemingly abandoned, yet radiating a power beyond comprehension. "That's not a natural formation," Malik murmured. "No," Rains agreed, his pulse quickening. "That's a ship." The realization settled over the crew like a cold fog. It was colossal, dwarfing even the largest Galactic Union dreadnoughts. And it was waiting. "Sir," Was said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's activating." Before their eyes, the behemoth stirred. Lights flickered along its surface, a pulse of energy rippling outward. The presence they had felt was no longer just watching, it was responding. "We need to move," Rains said. "Now." But before he could give the command, the Celestial Dawn's systems flickered and shut down. The ship was trapped in the gravity of something far beyond their understanding, and there was no turning back. As the ship crossed the threshold of VA Sath, its outer layers shimmered and shifted. Panels slid into place, compartments unfolded, and energy conduits pulsed with a radiant glow. The crew watched in awe as the vessel expanded, revealing its second form, a leviathan of technology and power unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Its primitive appearance had been a ruse, a safeguard against outside interference. The laughing civilizations had been deceived. Humanity had not sent a mere exploratory vessel into the stars, they had sent an evolving titan, a ship designed to adapt, upgrade, and transcend its limitations. The warp drive surged with newfound energy, bending, in ways even the most advanced empires had never mastered. Hidden weapon systems emerged from beneath its plating, plasma cannons, energy barriers, and artillery designed not for conquest, but for defense against threats yet unknown. Those who had mocked Earth's starship now watched in stunned silence as it unveiled its true might. Inside the cockpit, Captain Elias Rains felt a surge of adrenaline. The transformation had been years in the making, a closely guarded secret known only to a handful of Earth's top scientists and strategists. The Celestial Dawn had been built with foresight, prepared for the possibility that humanity's first step into the cosmic stage would be met with hostility. Now, as the ship's true capabilities revealed themselves, Rains knew they had just become more than an exploratory mission, they were a declaration. Power levels stable, energy output exceeding projections. Lieutenant Arya was reported, her voice tinged with awe. The ship, it's rewriting its own systems in. Rains nodded, his fingers tightening around the armrest of his chair. This is what we were meant for, he murmured. Beyond the ship, the massive construct at the heart of VA, Sath stirred, responding to the energy unleashed by Celestial Dawn. The crew barely had time to register the change before gravitational waves rippled outward, distorting the very fabric of space. Captain! The construct, it's scanning us, shouted Chief Engineer Malik, his hands racing across his console. A deep, resonant hum filled the ship, more than a sound, it was a force pressing against their minds, testing them. This isn't just a structure, Voss whispered. It's a sentinel. It's been waiting. The ship trembled as an energy surge struck it. The hull groaned, but the new armor plating absorbed the impact. For the first time, the crew saw the construct in its entirety, a behemoth of ancient design, shifting and unfolding like an awakening giant. Rains gritted his teeth. Activate defensive systems. Do not engage unless absolutely necessary. The ship's new defenses came online, shimmering shields reinforcing its frame. The Galactic Union, none of them had weapons like these, and yet they were not meant for war. They were meant for survival. Then, the transmissions started. Not voices, not words, but emotions, ideas, an intelligence far beyond human comprehension reaching out. Images flashed in their minds, planets consumed, civilizations erased. The construct was a remnant of a war long forgotten, a guardian against something that lurked beyond the known universe. And now it had recognized Celestial Dawn as either a potential ally, or an enemy. Captain, we're receiving a data stream, but it's not in any language we recognize, Voss said. The ship's onboard AI struggled to interpret the influx of information, processing it at unfathomable speeds. It's warning us, Malik said, his voice barely above a whisper. Something is coming. And it's worse than anything the galaxy has ever known. The ship's sensors flared as new anomalies appeared on the edge of the system, something moving, something immense. The construct responded, its own defenses activating, ancient weapons coming online after millennia of dormancy. Captain, we have a decision to make, Voss said. If we stay, we could unlock knowledge beyond imagination. If we leave, we might never know what's coming for us. Rains stared at the data flooding his screen, his mind racing. They had set out to prove humanity's place among the stars, but they had stumbled upon something far greater, a battle that had begun long before them, when that could determine the fate of the galaxy. We came to explore, he finally said, but fate has other plans. We're not running. We're seeing this through. The crew braced as Celestial Dawn aligned itself with the ancient Sentinel, no longer just an starship, but a force in a war that had yet to begin. Across the galaxy, those who had once marked Earth now watched in stunned silence, knowing that whatever lay ahead, humanity had earned its place in the stars. The DC now struck the ocean's surface with a violent force, shattering the aircraft's structure. Water surged in instantly, sending passengers into panic as they fought to escape. The impact had been survivable, but the battle was far from over. Life vests and rafts were deployed as the fuselage began to sink beneath the waves. The tropical sun, which had been obscured by storms, now shone down on a desperate scene, passengers clinging to wreckage, the crew attempting to maintain order amidst chaos. The smell of fuel spread across the water, a reminder of how close they had come to an explosion upon impact. The survivors, battered and exhausted, struggled to stay afloat in the rough sea. Some had managed to get into the rafts, their hands shaking as they gripped the edges, staring at the remains of the aircraft floating nearby. Others, injured and weak, clung desperately to debris, their voices hoarse from calling out for help. Captain Simmons, chest heaving from exertion, pulled himself onto a raft and immediately began counting heads. He knew the rescue efforts would be swift, but in this vast expanse of water, every minute counted. He scanned the horizon, searching for any sign of approaching aircraft or ships. The flight attendants, trained for emergencies but never truly prepared for a scene like this, moved from raft to raft, ensuring passengers were secure and as calm as they could be in such a horrific situation. One attendant gripped a terrified woman's hand, whispering words of reassurance even as her own hands trembled. "They'll find us soon," she murmured. "Just hold on." The ocean, vast and indifferent, seemed to stretch endlessly around them. The waves swelled and crashed unpredictably, sending cold sprays of salt water over the survivors. A man, his face streaked with blood from a head wound, groaned in pain as another passenger tried to keep him upright. "Help will come," the passenger assured, though doubt flickered in his eyes. Hours passed, stretching into what felt like an eternity. A few survivors sobbed quietly, their energy drained from the trauma. Others sat in stunned silence, their minds replaying the nightmare over and over again. Some kept their eyes fixed on the sky, desperate for the sight of a rescue plane. Then a distant hum cut through the sound of the waves. Heads snapped upward as a search aircraft appeared, its shadow casting a hopeful streak across the water. A flare was fired from one of the rafts, a bright signal against the endless blue. The plane circled, confirming their location. Relief swept through the survivors. Help was finally coming. The first rescue boats arrived soon after, cutting through the waves with precision. Coast Guard personnel pulled survivors aboard, wrapping them in blankets and checking for injuries. Tears mixed with seawater on many faces, gratitude overwhelming the exhaustion. Some could barely speak as they were lifted from the water, their bodies shaking from shock. Captain Simmons, the last to be rescued, collapsed onto the deck of the vessel, his mind spinning. The weight of the disaster settled heavily on his shoulders. 40 people had survived. The rest were gone, swallowed by the sea. The realization left an ache deeper than any wound. As the survivors were taken to shore, the wreckage of Alm Flight now saw a sea drifted further into history, a ghostly reminder of a desperate crew and the awful decisions they had been forced to make. The tragedy would be analyzed for years, lessons drawn from every misstep. But for those who had lived through it, the memory would never fade. The cries, the chaos, the fight for survival, it would haunt them forever, a stark reminder of how fate and human choices can intertwine in the most unforgiving of circumstances.